Good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday. How is everyone doing? I want to see some familiar faces and familiar names in the comments. So please, everyone, say hello, say hi. I want to see who's here for this third tasting in the OurWhisky series. This is the OurWhisky Virtual Whiskey Festival. Thanks so much for joining us again. Gosh, we've had such an amazing festival so far. It's been super exciting. We've had some amazing distillers on board, people talking through their whiskies. We've had some incredible samples as well. Anyone who caught us last week, we had Bill Lumsden and Brendan McCarran from the Glenmorangie company on. So they talked us through Glenmorangie and Ardbeg. Week before, we had 5 whiskey makers from all around the world. That was an amazing tasting. Oh, everyone's coming on. Hi, Greg. Thanks. Thursday's going all right. Thanks. Cheers, mate. Zoe Balkwell, Sean Murphy. Hey, how you doing? Nice to see lots of names here. Blair Bowman, massive hello. Lawrence, hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you? Nice to see everyone coming in. Okay. So before we get started and introduce you to all the whiskies, which I'm sure you're dying to try, and to introduce you to our whiskey makers who are now with me and super excited to meet you all as well, I just want to run you through exactly what we're going to be doing. So the OurWhisky Virtual Whiskey Festival has been designed as a way to raise a little bit of money for charity. So all of the profits from the festival will be donated to the Drinks Trust, which is a charity which helps hospitality workers in their times of need. So obviously right now we're going through the coronavirus and the hospitality industry really needs our help. So all the profits from this are going to the Drinks Trust. So thank you everybody for purchasing a pack of whiskies, because this is really going to help them. Every single brand that's involved in the festival has also sponsored it. So thank you to every single brand that's been involved so far, and the ones involved today and next week as well. So next week is our last session. OurWhisky, if you're not aware, is a educational platform. We're kind of transitioning into this new lease of life. So we began 2 years ago championing the fact that whiskey can be enjoyed by anybody in the world. Doesn't matter whether you're a young drinker of legal drinking age, obviously, or old. You can be a man or a woman. You can be of any background at all. And we just wanted to make sure that whiskey can get into the hands of people who will love it. And we're sure that everyone would love whiskey if given the chance. We're now moving into becoming an educational platform to try and teach everybody about whiskey in a really accessible, fun way. And we're really glad that you're here for the ride as well. So this is kind of like our first platform, really, our first event. So it's really exciting. What's next? What have I not said? Oh God, do you know what? Two people we have to thank for all of this, because without them, none of this would have been possible. First of all, we have to thank Claxton's, who are a bottler based up in Dumfries. They have donated all of their time to fill all those bottles of whiskey that you have in front of you. We also have to say a massive thank you to Chris Burrow from the Dram team as well, who has put all of these whiskies together for me as well. He's helped me out so much with this. So thank you to both of those guys for all of your help. Without them, none of this could be possible. So massive round of applause and a huge thank you to you guys. Thank you so much. Right, I think that's everything. Aside from, I've got a big question for you. It's super important. Are you following OurWhisky on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter? Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Because if you haven't, please do, because we would love to keep you with us and join us again for many more tastings that we might do in the future, and to come along with our ride as we transition into this new phase of our life. During the course of today, we will be asking all your questions to our whiskey makers. So please comment, please ask questions as we go along. I want to hear your tasting notes. I want to see what you think of all your whiskies. Say hello to everybody as well. If there's someone you don't know in your feed, say a quick hello to them, because we're all a big whiskey family. We're all in it together. God, I've been yapping on for 5 minutes now. So I think it's time for some whiskey. Is anyone interested in trying some whiskey? Maybe? Okay, a couple of yeses. Excellent. That's the right answer. We're probably about time I should probably introduce you to our whiskey makers. So I'm going to bring them in one at a time. I hope you're excited for this, because it's been incredible bringing them in. So first of all, we've got the always very well dressed Richard Patterson. Hi, Richard.
How are you doing?
Great, thank you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Yes, unbelievable.
Thanks for bringing the show. You look always smart, super smart.
You got to make an effort, you know.
Okay, next we're going to bring in our second whiskey maker. It is... Oh, no, I'm doing this wrong. Here he is. Billy Leighton.
Cheers, folks. Thanks, Becky. Yeah.
Oh, do you know what? Technology's escaped me today. I think we've seen everyone in the stream. How are you doing, Billy?
Doing great, Becky. Yeah. Couldn't be better under the circumstances, yes.
You've got a nice, colourful whiskies display behind you, at least.
Yeah, some fantastic whiskies there behind me. We've an extra special one tonight.
All right, we're going to move on to our third whiskey maker, and it's none other than Sarah Burgess. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Becky. How are you?
Good, thank you. Again, looking fantastic. So, Sarah, you make the Macallan.
That's right, Becky.
I'm glad to have you.
You can see the Macallan Estate in the background here, so hopefully you're all looking forward to trying that.
Oh, see, you've totally given away it already. It's been a surprise.
I can't keep any secrets, Becky. There's no surprises with me.
Well, I'm glad to have you with us, Sarah. Okay, right, I'm going to move on and introduce our fourth whiskey maker, and that is Adam Hannett of Brook Laddie.
Hi there, Becky. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, I suppose despite the circumstances, very, very well. Thank you very much.
Where are you just now? Is that your living room?
I wish it was. I'm actually, as you know, Isla is not renowned for its fast internet connection, so I'm actually at the distillery in one of the meeting rooms just now. I'd love to say that was my whiskey collection behind me, but I'm afraid not.
Well, I know you've got super fast Wi-Fi there, so I don't blame you.
We do, yeah.
Yeah. Right, so our fifth whiskey maker is, let's introduce the one and only Brian Kinsman, Glenfiddich. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Becky. Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Looking forward to an unusual tasting tonight, but yeah, all good fun.
Unusual in the sense that, how many of these online tastings have you done so far?
Well, not too many actually. I've got a few lined up now. It's almost like once you do one, they start to slowly appear. So I feel like I've been in this room permanently for 2 months now, which I suppose it could be worse places.
I guess so. You could ask your wife to unlock the door, maybe.
Well, yeah, no, she passes food through from time to time, but I've got a wee stash of whiskey down in the corner.
Well, I've got your priorities sorted. Guys, let's say a big hello to all of our whiskey makers, to Brian, Sarah, Adam, Richard, and Billy. So they've all got some amazing whiskies lined up for you to taste. As I said, please leave your questions in the comments for them. We'll try and get through as many of them as possible throughout the next 90 minutes or so. And we would also love to see any of your tasting notes from any of the whiskies as well. If you saw any of our social media posts today on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, you will have noticed that there is a exclusive whiskey being launched this evening. So you guys are among the very first to taste this whiskey. We're going to come to it later. I don't think most of our whiskey makers know that that's even happening. So we're going to come to that later. But first up, I want to make sure everybody has their whiskey with them. So hopefully you've got all your samples there with you as well, ready. I will advise, if you don't have a glass of water already, then please go and just grab one now. If you can just grab a glass of water, because you will need it, because if you've had a look at some of the labels, then you will have noticed that the ABV on a couple of them is quite high. So just in case you want to add any water, please go and grab a glass. Otherwise, if you have a whiskey tasting glass available as well, then have that to hand. So I love to taste with a Glencairn, which helps you nose quite nicely, and it's lovely to drink from too. If you don't have a Glencairn or a couple of them, then if you have a whiskey tumbler, that is fine as well. And if you don't have either of those, then I'd recommend trying a wine glass, perhaps. Certainly don't be drinking whiskey from a pint glass, because that's not going to do anyone any favors. Okay, right. So we're about to get started. I'm not sure ever what people's experience is with drinking whiskey. So it's always a good thing to do a guide to nosing and tasting whiskey for people who aren't that sure. And of course, if anyone's seen any of his videos on YouTube, you'll know the best person to run you through how to nose and taste the whiskey is Richard Patterson from the Dalmore. Richard, can you guide us through what to do?
All right. First of all, I just want to make sure that you're fully aware. You're probably asking, why are you dressed in this very dapper way? Well, actually, it's because of Becky. She actually mentioned the word family, and tomorrow is the International Day of Families. And families is being kind of split up during this very, very difficult time. But also, I understand it was possibly Becky's birthday at the end of this month. So I thought perhaps we'd just celebrate these two very, very special occasions. Now, I'm going to actually be rude and leave the tasting slightly later on, because I want to make sure that you get into the whiskey at the right time when we're actually going to sample this Dalmore King Alexander. So first of all, what I've got here with me is, of course, the Dalmore King Alexander. We're going to be sampling this. But it is, of course, a single malt, comes from one distillery only. Fenwick, Cairn, Tamnavule, and Jura, they're all Highland malts, but they're slightly different, with Dalmore being 22 miles north of Inverness. And it was actually started by Alexander Matheson way back in 1839. But the man that really did it, this man behind me, is Andrew Mackenzie. He arrived in 1867 with his brother Charles, and on the 26th of January 1868, he started distilling for the very first time. Now, he wanted to be entrepreneur. He was only 25 years old when he arrived at the distillery, but he wanted to make his mark. And his mark was in 1874, in October, he doubled the capacity of his distillery. So that's the first change you've got to remember. What we're talking about here is a pot still, not small, not squat. This is a big, fat, bulbous pot still that gave complexity. And then what he did was he put it into the wood. But quite often during these early years in the 19th century, he would be actually putting new spirit out into the market and selling it. Well, Andrew Mackenzie wanted to be different. He said, I want to mature my whiskies much longer, 10, 20, 30, even 40 years, which was unthinkable in the 19th century. It wouldn't be until 1915, 1916, on the 19th of May, when whiskey became 3 years old for the very first time. Okay, hope you've got that. So he actually produced these whiskies, matured them much longer, was ahead of the game, but maturation is absolutely key. Never, never forget. If you want style, if you want character, you have to mature your whiskies in the right cask. And 80% of the influence comes from the cask. So, so important. So when it comes to the Dalmore, this is something completely different. This is a whiskey, the only single malt in the world with 6 different finishes. We're talking about port, Madeira, Marsala, Cabernet Sauvignon, small batch bourbon, and Methuselah sherry. 6 separate assemblages. And this is going to have many years behind the label. None of this 5, 6, 7, 20. You know, we're talking in excess, obviously, of these very rare ages to get the right style. Because when you bring these 6 different assemblages together, what do you get? You get a box of chocolates opening up in front of you. But always remembering the DNA of Dalmore is always chocolate orange. That is the DNA. Now, as Becky said, you can put it into this glass. Well, this is a normal crystal glass, but look what it does. You can get 1, 2, 3, you can get 4 fingers in the glass. So that means there's a lot of air disappearing, and actually the aromas are disappearing. Whereas, okay, the Glencairn crystal glass, now 25 million glasses out there, but this is the baby here. This is, of course, the Copa Capita glass, so that when you put it to your nose, the aroma stays in there. It doesn't disappear. So the first thing I'm going to say to you, try and get the right glass. but do it slowly. Don't be anything like knocking it back like a bunch of cowboys. What I want you to do is to hold at the bottom. If I see you holding it like this, if I see you warming it like this, what do you get? A slap, okay? So what you do is you swirl it around, bring it up and say, hello. And then you go back to it and say, how are you? And then you bring it up and say, well, thank you very much. But you need to do it slowly, very slowly. Take your time. You've got two nostrils, one will be better than the other. So that's why you say hello. And up comes the aroma, and then you start to get the nuances. Now, like Coco Chanel number 5, introduced May, of course, 5th of May, 1921, 26 different aromas, of course, with many different styles. Whereas what you're looking here is for the top note, and that top note is chocolate orange. So you don't want to let it dominate with all the casks that you're using. But then what you do is you don't knock it back. So I want you to pick up your glass just now. Never mind what type it is, just do it slowly, bring it up and say, hello, pull away. Do it very slowly. Come on, look at it, pull away. And then the aromas start to rise and you start to look at the different nuances. You've got the lovely cherry note, the sun-kissed raisins. You've got the cassis from the Cabernet Sauvignon. You've got the plum note coming through, all right? So you've got all these nuances, but it is all about holding in the mouth. This is what I want you to do next. I don't want you to go, that's great. Don't do that. What I want you to do is this. Let it go down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello there. It starts to open up. The first taste is important, but it's always the second taste. Never let it go just the first taste. You must let it go in, hold it there, but let it go down. So go back to it a second time and go. And let it go down. Then it starts to open up and it starts to see the style. Now, what you can do is if you want to open up a bit more, you can put some water in it, just a little spot of water, not sparkling water. You need to be very careful there. Have I got over my time? No? I'm all right?
You're all right, but I think there's some questions. I'm not sure you've mentioned yet what the whiskey is that you're asking everyone to note and taste.
Yeah, I put it up, Dalmore King Alexander. There we are.
There you go. There you go. Dalmore King
You've seen this. Dalmore King Alexander. Do not forget it. Introduced 17th of November 2007, 13 years ago, and one of the only single malts in the world, as I said, with 6 different finishes. There we go. So there we have it. So you can look at it, hold it, but with all these different casks, as I said, the DNA, that chocolate orange of the Dalmore must be allowed always to come through. The enhancement from the other casks are important, but you must keep that DNA, the actual character of that whiskey shining through. So remember what I said to you, hold it long in the mouth, remember the wood, the shape of the pot still. All of us here from the distilleries, where Bruichladdich, Glenfiddich, Balvenie, they're all different shapes, different waters, different locations. There's a location of the Dalmore, 22 miles north of course, Inverness, overlooking the Cromarty Firth. And as I look at that, you can see some of the warehouses hugging the water, the maritime climate. And of course, when you see the distillery in the background with the hills, that also generates a little terroir, is what we call, to the character and style of the Dalmore.
So, Richard, just tell us a little bit, because you've been working with the Dalmore for such a long time, but you've been in the industry for over. I don't want to say
coming up 55 years, but not the same. There's Big Brian up there smiling his head off, because David Stewart, I think, is 56 years coming up on the 3rd of August, if I remember rightly. So he's been a little bit longer than me. But it's people like you, Becky, to make sure the generations out there through the internet, Instagram, is being brought to the people. The actual whiskey festival started in 1997 in Frankfurt, then moved to New York in 1998 in November, and that's what opened the world. You know, if we went to a festival and said, do you want a Glenfiddich 12-year-old, do you want a Brewick Laddie 15, or do you want a Dalmore 12, they'd kill us, because what they're looking for is innovation all the time. The consumer has become far more demanding, and with the result, we're seeing some fabulous, fabulous whiskies, open to the consumer.
Absolutely. So for everybody following along, that was Dalmore King Alexander III. So that one's bottled at 40% ABV. And seeing some of the comments coming in. Guys, that was number one, by the way, if that wasn't clear, being the first whiskey we're tasting. That was whiskey sample marked number one. We'll go through them in chronological order from now on. So if you do get lost, then please just ask, and I'll try and put it up on screen. So what does everybody think about that whiskey? What tasting notes did you get? Did everyone taste through the chocolate? Everyone getting lots of chocolate and orange notes coming through? Richard, I've got a question for you from Sean Murphy, who asks, how did you get the balance between so many different finishes, so many different casks?
Sean, brilliant question. What we do to get that balance, and all of us in the blending idea must get that balance, must get that harmony. How do we do it? We bring these 6 assemblages together, and then what we do is we marry them. We don't just put them together and then put it in the bottle. We actually put them back into the in situ sherry butts. It commences that extra marrying to let all these component parts come together. They're not an equal proportion. I can tell you that right now. There's bits of this, bits of that, extensions, etc., to get the perfect flavor. But get that balance, and that's brought by marriage. And the marriage takes its time to come together.
Absolutely. Getting a lot of lovely comments coming all the way through here. People saying that they absolutely love this one. So some great tasting notes here. Terry's Chocky Ori.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Terry's, yeah. Keep it down to 72% cocoa fat. That's great. You want to enjoy this? Switch the lights off. Take a coffee, the whiskey, the King Alexander, take a chocolate and do it, and they'll all combine together. Then get out your Hoye de Monterey Epicure number 2, your Cahiba Bahiki. Have a puff with it.
Is that a cigar, Richard?
A big cigar, that's it.
So.
Okay.
Don't look at me in that way. Okay. All right, great.
Right, you never know. Be Scots can try and get away with anything.
Hey, Becky, just online. It is your birthday at the end of the month, is it not?
Yes. And
Right.
I don't really know how you know that. Is it because we had a conversation once about how you always consult a birthday book to figure out the personalities of people you're making whiskies for?
If I don't know the personality, quite often that's what I do. So I'm not going to mention the date because that's very personal, but I'll just tell you later on.
Yeah, maybe not. Sorry for everybody who's had a lockdown birthday. It must be very strange for everyone having that. Certainly mine will be the same. Guys, this has been such a lovely whiskey. Thank you, Richard, so much for bringing along the Dalmore King Alexander III. Really delicious. Sean, who asked the question earlier, has said cigar and whiskey sounds like a great idea. With you on that for sure. Cool. Right. So I hope everybody enjoyed those whiskies. Really hope you've enjoyed that one so far. So we're going to be moving on now to number 2. Thank you so much, Richard, for that, and for bringing the style to this lovely festival.
You won't forget that one, Becky, will you?
I nearly sent a memo round Richard that we should all be dressing up in our best suits and bow ties. Right, so we're going to move on to our second whiskey. So whiskey number 2, and this one is going to be introduced by the lovely Sarah Burgess. So Sarah Burgess is the lead whiskey maker for the Macallan. Hi, Sarah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure that I can quite follow the dramatics of the famous Richard Patterson, so hopefully you've all remembered how to nose and taste Richard's style, and you can do your own humming and swishing your whiskey around in your mouth as I'm talking about this whiskey. So I'd first of all like to explain a little bit about how we make whiskey here at Macallan. We have a whiskey mastery team which comprises of 6 people, 3 guys and 3 girls. We have a huge amount of experience in the whiskey industry throughout the team, and for us it's very important to work in a team environment. We nose every single cask of Macallan that we have in stock, of course, so that we know and understand the maturing stocks, but also every single bottle of Macallan that is available for sale anywhere in the world, the contents of that bottle, all of those casks have all been individually selected on the bench at the Macallan Distillery. So for those of you that have not been to Speyside, I'd like to kind of bring a bit of Speyside to you. So the Macallan Distillery sits inside our very own estate. So that is our beautiful distillery, opened in 2018. The estate itself is 485 acres. It is extremely beautiful. We have our very own fishing beat on the river. We have fields where we grow our own barley, which we send to have malted, and we bring that back to the distillery, distill, and then lay into our exceptional oak casks and wait until it is ready before it's been selected for any of our whiskies. Now, when we went to create estate, we talked a lot about what did the estate mean and what does Speyside mean. And actually the estate and Macallan and our spiritual home of Easter Elchies all came back to one specific point, and that was about home and about that comforting aromas of home. So if you take your estate whiskey, we talk quite a lot about the colour, because with Macallan we are 100% natural colour, and the colour for me reminded me so much on the estate just down from the distillery, and before you get to Easter Elchies house there are huge conker trees. So actually the conkers there, they are so large that my children love them. So every year I collect conkers for them, and then they have conker wars. So the colour of this really reminded me of the conkers that you find here on the estate. Now, I've spent quite a lot of time nosing this whiskey, and I feel so passionate about it. The homely notes of cinnamon, the oak spices, the wood spices that you get through this, which I think are characteristic of Macallan, that real intense dried fruit, fig, raisin, and the citrus is really strong in estate too. Orange oil, really, really dominant in there. Now, with estate, what I've found is that the addition of water is really very good, and it changes the whiskey quite significantly. Some people don't like to add water, but I think this is a really great opportunity with your tasting packs to add a little bit of water. I've got 2 whiskies here, one with water, and one without water. And actually that aroma change, the orange really just lifts right out when you add the water. It almost gets to that kind of comforting marmalade on toast, that cereal element, going back into what we tried to do when we created estate, and that what do you smell? What is the feel of the estate when you go around? So obviously that strong cereal aroma from our barley draft, that warmth, that feeling of home. Hopefully you can appreciate what I'm trying to explain from this whiskey. And of course, you don't want to spend the whole time just nosing your whiskey. So cheers.
Cheers, Sarah. This is delicious.
Thanks, Becky. Did you try it? Did you?
I got a tasting pack for myself, so
Did you try with water or without water? Do you have a preference?
Well, I always like to try whiskies without water to start with, just because I don't know what I'm adding water to, and I don't know how much to add to start with. So I always like to taste first, and then I'll add a little after. So I haven't added any to this yet. Oh my God. Do you know what? I was just about to grab some water. My cat has just walked onto the table. So everyone who's been watching this festival will know my cat always likes to make a present. She's now drinking my water.
Okay, so you're not going to be able to add any water to this, Becky.
She doesn't want me to add water to my whiskey, sorry.
Hopefully the people that are actually watching this have been able to add some water, and we'll start to see some comments coming through the feed.
We've got some lovely comments coming in through already. So Lawrence Pereira says, that is Christmas in a glass, beautiful. Josh Crockett has added some water and says it's really delicious with water. There's a question that's come through from Ben Marnock. He says, what styles of sherry cask do Macallan use? Is it all Oloroso and PX?
We have a combination of sherry cask seasoning, sherry seasoned casks in our maturing stocks at Macallan, but with the estate, it is a combination of European and American oak sherry seasoned casks, Oloroso seasoned.
Okay, brilliant. I've got another comment here, which is the water definitely opens up the taste. I think that is, I'm getting raisin and spices, which is really lovely.
I think from all, some whiskies, as all of you know, some of them love a little bit of water, some are not so fond of water, and it's a little bit of trial and error with water. But with estate, I think it changes it quite dramatically. So some people that don't enjoy it quite so much without water, when they add water, it completely changes their perception, which I find really very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Now I know there's a question that's come in, and I know it is possible to do this because I have been down and watched a few people do it, although I've not done it myself. But so Jason Whiskey Wise has asked, is it possible to go fishing on the beat when visiting Macallan? Because obviously you're right there on the Spey.
The fishing season for Macallan and for the Spey opens on the 13th of February every year and closes, I think, the end of September. I always get confused with closing. Opening I'm all good with, but closing I always forget. What happens with Macallan fishing is the weeks tend to be fully booked. The same people come back year after year after year, so it is very difficult to get an experience fishing on the river. But that's definitely something that you can phone through our customer service team, and they'll be able to help you with that.
Yeah, is it acceptable to fish whilst social distancing, Sarah?
Right now there is no fishing on the river.
Wow.
Which, yeah, that's the rules.
Them the rules. Yeah, I live in Brighton on the south coast, and we're not allowed to swim in the sea, much to everybody's disappointment. For all the tourists that like to come to Brighton during lockdown, they're always come down and disappointed that they can't go swimming in the sea. But
there's no huge desire to swim in the space, so we know we're not worrying about that.
I've definitely taken a tumble in the Spey, and I know that Sean Murphy, who is watching along, has also done the same thing. tumbled out of a canoe, although that wasn't by choice. Sarah, thank you so much, guys. I'm really pleased that you like this one. There's so much, so many brilliant comments coming in. Whiskey Cast, so Mark Gillespie has also asked Sarah, which Macallan goes best with smoked salmon?
I don't think that that's really a choice. You could have any Macallan with smoked salmon. I wouldn't necessarily pick one. What doesn't go with smoked salmon? Tell me.
No idea. Couldn't say.
I'd probably go for 12 double cask if I had to pick one.
Okay, fab.
Just because of that sweetness,
I guess that would cut through the fattiness of the fish, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I hope that answers your question, Mark. Lovely. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that. So, guys, that was the Macallan Estate, and that was a 43% ABV whiskey. All of these whiskies, I'm going to put the links to where you can purchase them from in the comments at the end of the tasting. So if there's anything that catches your eye and you do fancy picking it up, then do follow the links and go and pick up a bottle, because these guys do have some extraordinary whiskies. Okay, I hope everyone's enjoying themselves so far and that no one has rushed ahead, because we are coming to the strongest whiskey of the bunch. And this is where your water will come in handy. And I think I might have to dash off while he's introducing it and get myself some more cat-free water. So I'm going to ask Brian Kinsman now to introduce his whiskey, which is number 3. So whiskey number 3 here. Brian, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you definitely need to go and get some water, because much as I enjoy tasting strong whiskey, it will benefit from a little bit of water, just to add a bit more depth and complexity.
This is actually the exclusive launch of this whiskey. So you will not have heard about this whiskey so far. This is, as I understand it, forgive me if I'm wrong, Brian, but the global launch of this particular Glenfiddich whiskey. Is that right?
It is indeed. It is indeed. And what better company to do it in? So it's great to be able to do it on the forum today. Actually, it's with really, really mixed feelings that we're going to even talk about this whiskey, because if we wind back a few weeks, most of us on this call and people watching, and I'm sure people watching on other platforms, would have all been in Speyside for the Speyside Whisky Festival. And clearly that's been one of the many casualties of the current crisis, where the Whisky Festival didn't happen. And for us, it was going to be a particularly special one as well, because we were planning to host the opening dinner at the distillery, and then to have a whole series of events running through the whole festival. So really bittersweet to have missed that, and I'll explain why when I come to talk about this whiskey. Because every year since at least 2013, every year myself and the team at the distillery have picked a cask that we then sell as an exclusive, only available at the distillery, only for people who come to the festival, and it's been hugely popular. And we've tried to always look for something a little bit different, something a little bit special, something that really showcases Glenfiddich, but also almost makes it a special event to have been there at the distillery, to be able to get hold of the cask. So clearly, when the news came through that the festival wasn't going to happen, that the distillery visitor centre was closed, and that really operations were going to be taken right back to the bare minimum, where we can still operate with social distancing clearly, and still continue to actually distill and fill casks, it looked as though our opportunity to do the exclusive bottling this year was finished, which was a shame, because it was already underway. We'd already started to go through the warehouses. I'd started to create a shortlist, and normally then work with the team up at the distillery to let them be part of the selection process. But thankfully, we've actually been able to do a pretty amazing thing where the guys have still managed to get the cask from the warehouse and get it bottled. And so what we're going to taste tonight is actually the 2020 Spirit Speyside special edition for the Glenfiddich distillery. This is the first time anybody's tried it outside a very small team, and as I say, it should have been tasted collectively at the Speyside Whisky Festival. Now, I'll tell you more about the whiskey in a second, but to just explain a little bit about it, because obviously it might seem a little bit strange that we're still going to do a product launch right in the middle of a crisis. But one of the reasons we're doing it is we're going to take 100% of the proceeds, 100% of the revenue that comes from the sale of these bottles, and we're going to donate that all to charitable causes in Speyside, because clearly a huge number of people have been massively affected by this, and we think it's our way of allowing us to still indulge ourselves with tasting great whiskey, but also to put a little bit back into the community that's been at the heart of the distillery, and indeed all the distilleries in Speyside for hundreds of years, but for us, 130 odd years. So it's a nice little way to put back in. Just as a name check, we're going to be giving some of the money to the Murray Food Plus, which is a kind of a charity that tries to eliminate food poverty. Another one called Kieran's Legacy, that is a really wonderful local charity that looks to put defibrillators and kind of life-saving equipment available to the public, and then also to the NHS Grampian charitable side, because clearly we're all very, very grateful for what everybody in the NHS is doing. So that's enough about the process. Let's try the whiskey. And I'm glad I managed to bring the right glass, because I think Richard would have told me off if I'd had the wrong glass. So that was a nice little relief when I saw this one sitting on the table. But I have to I'd say a little bit of caution, because as Becky says, this is a very strong, this is cask strength. It's unusually high cask strength as well. This is sitting at 65.7%. It's a 2007 Glenfiddich. It's just shy of its 13th birthday, so it's actually 12 years old. It might actually have the same birthday as you, Becky. It's going to be on the 24th, so you don't have to say if it is or not. But it's later on this.
Can I get a free bottle?
Well, maybe, you never know.
On a spot.
You've already got a little sample.
I know, it's enough. It's fine. I'll take it.
So in terms of, please nose it at full strength. And actually, it's surprising, because sometimes you try whiskey that's so strong and you're just overcome with alcohol. But I think there's so much going on in the body of this cask that it doesn't actually overpower you. Now, it's quite hard to pick out nuances, and when we add water, that'll definitely change. And then definitely follow the advice of Richard and Sarah, and when you taste it, leave it in your mouth for a long time, because you really want that alcohol to evaporate away. It's too strong to just swallow it. You're going to lose all the flavour. So take a taste, sit it in your mouth, let it mellow there, let the alcohol evaporate, and you'll slowly see, just over 10, 20, 30 seconds, that flavour just really start to develop. Big flavour. So this is it's actually a second fill sherry cask. So it's been filled in Spain. A second refill sherry cask filled in Spain. We've then used it twice at the distillery, once for a relatively short cask finish, and then once for a full-on maturation. You can still see amazing, make sure I get it in the camera, amazing natural colour, beautiful depth, that lovely kind of amber. The intensity of the sherry wood has gone, so the really, really big Christmas cake notes have gone. And for me, this is a much more balanced expression of Glenfiddich, because it's still got the fruitiness, it's still got the core character that I would expect to see from the distillery, and it's overlaid just with that really gorgeous, nutty, slightly waxy notes that you get from European oak. So once you've tried it and you've nosed it and you've tasted it at full strength, definitely add some water, because we're going to see it really transform, and this can take quite a lot. Obviously, we're sitting up at 65%. So it can take quite a lot, and it'll just break the alcohol, and it'll really start to open up. And suddenly the nose actually almost takes me by surprise. I've tried it many times, but it's just got such a diverse flavour, and it comes and goes. The one thing that I just think goes all the way through it is a citrus, lovely orange note. It seems to appear. Then you'll get some of the dried fruits. The classic kind of baked apple type intensity of fruit of Glenfiddich. And then same on taste, that intensity of taste will now have gone, because the alcohol is not as strong. But the mouth coating will be, I think, even more, because you've got a bit of water in there. It's not going to quite attack your mouth in the same way, and it's beautifully silky smooth.
Brian, if this is 65.9%, what would it have gone into the cask at in the first place? Because most whiskey in Scotland is filled into cask at 63%, and as we know, over time it will lose alcohol. So what did this go into the cask at?
Yeah, so we are slightly unusual at Glenfiddich. We fill some of our stock at 63, like the vast majority, and we also fill some stock at 68. And the reason we fill it at 68 is that whole balance of the alcohol versus water soluble compounds. So we feel we get some slightly different flavour compounds at 68 as compared to 63, and it just gives us more of a flexibility when it comes to make the final vatings or single malt. So this would have gone just slightly over 68. Now, I have to be honest, I'm still slightly surprised, and it's relatively unusual to still be so high after nearly 13 years. And that's just as we all know, that's just down to the kind of individuality of casks, almost the mystery of maturation. Some casks filled on the same day will be 2 or 3% lower. This one's held up its strength phenomenally well. It's hardly lost any alcohol at all, and yet the take up from the cask has been tremendous.
There's some lovely comments coming through about some tasting notes, crunchy nut cornflakes. I certainly have that huge orange note as well. It's like citrus peel when you just like a fresh zest that you're going to pop into an old fashioned. It's that kind of feeling to it, which I think is really lovely. So how many bottles have been created, Brian, and how can people get hold of one?
Yep, so there's 450 bottles. And I have to say a huge thank you to the guys in the distillery and the shop and all sorts of people who pitched in to help, because it's all had to be done hand bottled and very difficult circumstances, as you can imagine, trying to make sure that everybody stays safe. So it's 450 bottles, and we're going to sell it as a partnership through whiskyauctioneer.com. And as I say, all the proceeds will go to the 3 charities I mentioned and into the kind of local community in Speyside. So great opportunity to try a fantastic whiskey, and obviously easy for me to say, but actually also a great opportunity, hopefully, to put a little bit back into the community that's been so badly affected.
Absolutely. So you said this is about 13 years old?
It's just short. I mean, if we had an age statement on it, it would say 12, because it's 13 on the 24th of May, and it's obviously already in a bottle. So it's filled in 2007, sat in the same warehouse 26 at the distillery, and a second refill, Oloroso sherry butt. And yeah, I think it's fitting for what we were always looking for the festival, something different, something a little bit that you wouldn't see before, something that wouldn't necessarily be part of the core range for Glenfiddich, but it's fun. I think trying whiskies like this straight from the cask is fun. It's always fun. Always puts a smile on people's faces. And yeah, Slange.
Yeah, Slange. It's great to see a different personality of Glenfiddich for sure. I'm only sorry that you other whiskey makers in on the call didn't get a pack. I would have loved to send you, but you know, we're raising money for charity here, so there's only so many we can send out. But this was wonderful. Sarah and Macallan is also up in Speyside as well. Were you planning on doing a festival bottling this year? And if so, what sort of style would you have wanted to do for Spirit of Speyside?
We didn't have any plans to create a festival bottling. As always, we would have been running our festival events, so we had planned to have a series of Macallan dinners over the Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights, plus obviously, of course, our distillery tours and the varying different levels of tours that you can take. So we were pretty much booked up to capacity like most of Speyside. But I think on the plus side, I think it's the very first year of the festival that the weather's actually been bad in Speyside. So that was the only bonus, that there was no festival this year.
Silver linings, isn't there?
Oh.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. It's a shame not to be up there with everyone celebrating, which is always such a lovely experience to be up in Speyside in the sunshine and having a few drinks with everyone down at the Copper Dog at the Craigellachie Hotel, and just chilling out on the Spey and drinking drams of Craigellachie down on the beach there, and wandering around the distilleries and seeing what everybody's doing. So it is a shame. It's also, you know, the other festival which has been cancelled, which is obviously a massive highlight of the year, is Facial of the Isla Festival, which Adam must be quite difficult as well. Like, must be heartbreaking to know that that's not happening here too.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very unusual thing, you know, because I mean, as long as I've been working at the distillery and longer, we've been having the festival here, and to not have it, you know, it's such a big part of the year on the island. You know, it's bigger and bigger every year, and it's great to welcome everyone in. But obviously, for very good reasons, we won't be having it this year. But it does feel very, very strange. We'll mark the occasion in the usual Brafari kind of way, but it won't be the same. It won't be the same at all. Yeah,
sure. All your distilleries must be very quiet places without bustling of tourists and whiskey lovers coming through, having a look at everything you've been doing. So I hope everything gets back to normal soon. It looks like everybody really enjoyed that Glenfiddich. The ABV is quite high. I absolutely agree with water. It just brings up more of that citrus note, sort of allows it to soften, and you can really taste it. So from what I understand, Brian, that the auction for that will be on Whisky Auctioneer from the 17th of May to the 20th of June. So, and as you said, 450 bottles. So if you did want to grab hold of one, then make sure you go and bid for one of those. And all of the proceeds are going to Speyside charities, which is fantastic, helping the local community. So well done to you and to everyone at Glenfiddich for doing that too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great whiskey. Cheers. Thanks very much. Guys, thank you so much again for staying with us during this tasting. I hope you're enjoying it. Again, don't be shy. If you've got any questions for any of our whiskey makers, then please leave a comment. There is no such thing as a stupid question. We are all new or have been in whiskey for a long time, and goodness knows I've asked my fair share of them over the years, as probably everyone on this call can attest to. They've all been the subject of many of my scathing interviews at one point or another. So there are no stupid questions, so please ask away. Are we ready for another whiskey? We're going to move out of Scotland now. So this is the curveball in the tasting, right? They're going to head over to Ireland, and to introduce his whiskey is Billy Leighton.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, indeed. The whiskey I'm going to introduce, it's a very new whiskey that we have just launched about 2 months ago. And you may see behind me that there's a range of single pot still Irish whiskies, all with Redbreast on the label. So what I'm going to introduce tonight is Redbreast 27. Okay. Redbreast 27 was a bit of I would say a little bit of a risk that we took with the Redbreast brand. So I'll come to that shortly, but just for those people that aren't sure of what a single pot still Irish whiskey is, it's kind of the traditional Irish whiskey, kind of the equivalent of a Scotch malt whiskey. But what defines it as a single pot still is basically the mash bill, and the mash bill is a mix of both malted and unmalted barley, and that pretty much is the definition of an Irish pot still whiskey. This is a single pot still whiskey, and the single means that it comes from one single distillery, and that is the Midleton Distillery in the town of Midleton in County Cork. There it is. There's a lovely photograph of the pot still outside of the Heritage Centre. It's a very quiet place just now, but we're all looking forward to the times when we're showing hundreds of thousands of visitors through there in the not too distant future. So what we do in Midleton in the distillation process, particularly to Midleton, and say it's a general rule, but it's not absolute. We triple distill our whiskey, so it tends to be a third distillation, which say generally would be one more than Scotch. The other guys might argue with me there, but the third distillation gives us quite a refined distillate. Maybe doesn't have as much character as like a double distilled whiskey might have. So for that reason, it's the maturation which is very, very important for us. So cask quality, the right type of cask, the distillate style as well. In the Middleton Distillery, in the pot stills, we can produce various styles of pot still whiskey. Different styles meaning different, we'd say different flavors. So we might have a light herbal kind of style, then a medium style which becomes a little bit more spicy, and then a heavier style which is more spicy and a little bit oily. So as a blender, I have all these different styles of pot still whiskey at my disposal. And then whenever you think once you've made that distillate, it has to be filled into casks. And that's what's very, very important, especially when it comes to redbreast. And just a little bit about the redbreast family, the redbreast style itself. It's typically a mix of whiskey that's being matured in ex-bourbon, a combination of ex-bourbon casks and ex-Oloroso sherry seasoned casks. So American oak on one side and European oak on the other side. I mentioned we took a bit of a gamble with Redbreast 27 because we started then and we did some trials with introducing some Ruby Port seasoned casks into the mix. The risk was, we have a very, very loyal following for Redbreast out there, and would they have a problem with us using port as well as Oloroso sherry? We launched this back in March this year, and again it was one of the events that suffered at the beginning of the current crisis. We had a really nice launch event planned on the banks of the Douro River. It was decided that it wasn't a good idea to have to be traveling there, be bringing media people there. So over the space of a weekend, our events team set up another event just outside Dublin on the banks of the Grand Canal. It wasn't exactly the Douro River, but we had a good evening there, and everybody enjoyed the Redbreast 27. I think what we need to get into is the combination of the American ex-bourbon seasoned casks, along with the Oloroso, along with the port. So if you've got a glass there, and again, luckily I chose the right sort of glass in the company tonight, and just before we even take a nose of it, it doesn't quite compare to the strength of Brian's, but it is bottled at cask strength, and it's 54.6% alcohol. So there will still be that little bit of intensity there. I would always be reluctant to add water. Same thoughts as Becky. Try it at its natural strength, whatever the bottling strength may be. Try it first of all and see what you get. So just at the nose of this one, straight away, there's loads of fruit in there. Now that fruit, typically with Redbreast, within the range of Redbreast, you might see behind me Redbreast 12-year-old, which would be the kind of the entry level for Redbreast. It's typically the influence of the Oloroso seasoned casks that's given us those dried fruit notes. In the combination of the port with this one, it adds another layer of fruity complexity to those dried fruit notes, which are the stable fruity character of the Redbreast range.
Billy, whenever this nose is incredible. I can only apologise to everyone else who doesn't have this glass in front of them, because that nose is like out of this world. But I always have with Redbreast, which is one of my favourite Irish whiskies, and I'm a sucker for single pot still. But I always have this kind of sherbety, spicy kind of sense when it comes to like nosing single pot still whiskey. Where does that come from? It's particular on Redbreast and on the 12-year-old as well. But where does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, the spiciness is purely coming from the distillate. Now, you may get a few wood spices combining there with that, but the nature of the pot still distillate is spicy. And I mentioned, like, we do like three different styles of pot still. In all of the Redbreast range, there are two of those styles, whether it be the 12-year-old, the Lestau, or the 15-year-old, or the 21-year-old. It'll be a combination of two of those styles. In the Redbreast 27, we've got all three. We've got a balance of all three, and so there are different levels of spice that we can work with to get the balance that we have here in the Redbreast 27. That's the spiciness. But I think what comes through almost above all that is the level of fruit. I mean, there's loads of I get stone fruit mainly coming from the port, like plums, ripe juicy plums, black cherries, maybe apricot, prunes, that type of character. But it all it's not fragmented in a way that there's the contribution of the Oloroso, there's the contribution from the bourbon casks, or there's the contribution from the port. Everything is kind of infused. It's an infusion of all those flavors coming together. And again, just in the taste, I mean, the nose creates a certain expectation from the taste. Again, bear in mind, 54.6%, but tasted at cask strength. It's an experience to be had.
I think adding just a touch of water there, it kind of becomes a little bit creamier. So you get more of a kind of like vanilla cream kind of character coming through, like custard cream, which I always get with bourbon casks. So that must be a
exactly that would be coming from the bourbon cask. There's custard cream, vanilla. So the sweeter spices that we're getting there will be most likely coming from the wood. So the bourbon, vanilla, cinnamon, a little bit of clove, a little bit of a prickle there that you get with clove, and there's a nice pepperiness in there that gives it a good bit of presence. You know you're drinking a nice, good whiskey with this one, and you know that fruitiness stays there right to the very end. It's succulent. My mouth is still watering, and it does end up, I think, with that port wine character, kind of a dry wine note right at the very end.
I think, you know, it's such a beautiful whiskey and so well put together, Billy. Everyone seems to be going nuts for this one, so I'm glad everyone's really enjoying it. Particularly as, you know, it's a single pot still Irish whiskey amongst the set of Scottish single malt. So a lot of people tend to just gravitate to Scottish single malt, which is obviously a wonderful style of whiskey and rightly so, very highly revered. But I think Irish whiskey has a lot to say as well, particularly with single pot still. So Middleton Distillery is has been producing single pot still whiskey for a long time, and you are kind of the flag holders for such a long time. But now there are a hell of a lot more distilleries, new Irish whiskey distilleries that are making single pot still for the very first time. So have you tried many of the other styles of single pot still that are available?
I've tried a few. Some of them are still quite young, you know, and I have been asked by a few distillers. Although we've been in it, Irish distillers have been in it for a long time. We're all very, very supportive of the new entrants into the category, and at whiskey shows and events, and even outside of events, we do get asked by distillers in that are new to the business to give our opinion on their new make production, particularly pot still. And I think they all see the single pot still category as the place they want to be for their Irish whiskey brand, you know, and it is the traditional style for Irish whiskey, and you know it's good that people are wanting to be part of that category, and you know we support them all the way.
Fantastic, Billy. Thank you so much for running us through that tasting. And I know you've got the launch of another special Redbreast coming up. Is it this weekend?
You've caught me there, Becky. Yes.
Am I not allowed to mention that?
Well, let's say over the past few years, it has become a tradition to do something on World Whisky Day, and this year's going to be no exception. I can't really say too much about it, but on the Redbreast website, there is a members area called the Birdhouse, and if people want to register, become members of the Birdhouse, all will be revealed there on Saturday at 3 p.m. I believe.
Exciting. Well, I will be there for sure. Thank you. As part of the World Whisky Day celebrations on Saturday, so Saturday the 16th of May, that is right, is World Whisky Day. So everybody who is enjoying this tasting and following along, and if you happen to have any of your whiskey left after this incredible tasting, then fill your glass and raise a glass to everybody else around the world who loves whiskey as much as we do. Billy, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. So everybody was really happy with that. So thank you so much. Okay, so we are going to move on to our fifth and final whiskey. I'm sad that this is even coming to an end, but what better person to round us all up than the wonderful, charming and always entertaining Adam Hannett.
That's very, very kind of you, Becky. Probably too kind, but then you've had a few drams, I suppose. So
hey,
fair enough.
I've seen you entertain the crowd at Facial. You know, I've been there. I've seen it.
Yeah, again, lots of cask strength whiskies. It always helps. It always helps. But it's really nice to be here with everybody. And I must say, when I got the invite and the email and saw the list of people, and then I was finishing off, I kind of thought, hang on, I'm who are these guys? You know, kind of warming up for me. It should surely be the other way around with these kind of legends of the whiskey industry here. But then I realised, obviously, the whiskey we're tasting is heavily peated, so that's probably why I'm our last to finish this off. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to be here with some great company. And disappointed I'm obviously not tasting the whiskies because they sound amazing. Some really, really fantastic drams there. But hopefully, the last dram we have here to taste, which is a Port Charlotte Isle of Barley, will finish us off nicely. And to kind of give a bit of context to what this is, you know, what Port Charlotte is, you know, why we're talking about Isle of Barley and peat smoke. I'm obviously head distiller at Bruichladdich on the Isle of Islay, and Islay is a very small island, population of about just over 3,000 people. And the whiskies that are made here in some very, very famous distilleries have a reputation for being very heavily peated, a very, very smoky, very traditional kind of style. And at Bruichladdich, we make a few different styles of whiskey. Bruichladdich, of course, which is usually unpeated for the island. And we decided when again, to kind of put a little bit of information in about the history of the distillery. It was mothballed in 1994 and then reopened in 2001 as an independent company. A lot of freedom, a lot of creative people. There was a gentleman called Jim McEwen, who my predecessor was very, very influential in the resurrection of the distillery at the time. And really, you know, Jim was very keen to make peated whiskey here because we could, because you know, even if for no other reason than that, but really to kind of explore that kind of Islay kind of history and heritage in the whiskey. And so Port Charlotte was born. Port Charlotte is the name we give to a heavily peated whiskey. And when you measure the peat, the smoke, you know, you can analyze that, and you can we'll talk about the ppm, which is the phenol part per million. Phenols are the group of chemicals that give us the smoky flavour. Our Port Charlotte is a ppm of about 40 ppm, which is kind of up there with the Lagavulins, the Lafroigs. They're roughly the same kind of ppm. So it's a very heavily peated whiskey, and really what we wanted to do was explore that more traditional style of Islay whiskey that you know, Bruichladdich is relatively unusual. We also make another type of whiskey called Dalmore, which is the world's most kind of heavily peated. It's very, very kind of heavily peated whiskey, but we're not ready for that today. We'll stick with Port Charlotte. So really, for us, Port Charlotte's it's a great whiskey when you think about peat, when you think about Islay. And for a lot of people, that can be quite off-putting. Again, there may be people tasting along with us who have tried peated whiskey before, don't like peated whiskey, but I'd urge you to kind of give this a go, because with Port Charlotte, what we have is a style very similar to Bruichladdich in that it's quite light, it's quite elegant, it's floral. And the peat smoke, when we're distilling, we're not looking to make a really big medicinal heavy peated whiskey. What we're looking to do is make a light, kind of fresh, elegant whiskey still, and then have that peat smoke, see where that peat smoke fits around in the conversation. So the other interesting aspect of what we're doing at the distillery is the barley, the focus on the kind of terroir and the story of the whiskey and how it comes into being, where it comes from. And terroir is a really important aspect for us. You know, we want to explore the flavours we get from the barley, where that barley is grown, whether it be mainland Scotland or in farms across Islay. And what we refer to as our Islay Barley project, if you like, is it's an interesting project. Over the last kind of 16 years, we've been encouraging farmers to grow for us on the island, which isn't done by anyone else really on the island. It's Culhone and others on the island who produce a little bit of Islay-grown whiskey as well. But really, we're very focused on the terroir, the soil, the varieties, and we want that to be at the forefront of the whiskey. So for this whiskey is Port Charlotte Islay Barley. And it's a 2011 vintage, which is quite unusual for a whiskey that we would focus on a vintage rather than an age statement. But really what we're seeing is that what we want to focus on is how these unique whiskies come into being. You know? What was specific about that 2011 distillation, 2010 harvest the barley was grown in? How does that come into being? How do we express those characteristics in our whiskey? And you know, it's a lovely thing where we're making whiskies that are different all the time. You know, there's no kind of pressure to make things kind of consistent and taste the same. We really want to express each vintage and each kind of moment in time in a really nice way, kind of following through the whole story of whiskey. You know, so one of the lovely things, with the lovely aspects when I got the bottle here, one of the lovely aspects is that we'll have the name of the farmers who grew the barley for us on there. So we've got Raymond up at Macallan Estate, we have Neil at Kilheran, and Sunderland Raymond Stewart up at Sunderland Farm as well. So we're really kind of following through the process, looking through the detail, creating whiskies, and this is a really lovely whiskey to be able to taste. So we should maybe do just that. We'll have a little Bill knows here, and again, I'm pleased to say I chose the right glass as well, so I won't have Richard frowning at me with the wrong glass. But it's a lovely thing. When you look at the colour, it's quite light. We're using a lot of bourbon casks in the maturation. It's about 3/4 of the cask will come from first fill. The other kind of 25% will be from second fill French oak casks. So we're getting a nice kind of structure from that oak. We get a lot of lovely kind of flavours to balance things out there. But the colour's beautiful. And again, when you look at the legs and the way that whiskey behaves in the glass, even though it's relatively young, it's about 7 years old. It's still got great viscosity. We're looking for really good texture in the whiskey. Bottling at 50%, so it's quite strong. If you have a little nose, it's you definitely kind of feel that heat, but it's really, really fragrant, really, really perfumed. But for a heavily peated whiskey, you don't really pick up the peat too much. It's very, very gentle. It's kind of like almost like the entry level kind of dram to get into Islay whiskies. I think with Charlotte, it's very, very accessible, very, very easy to approach. So really, what I'm picking up there is a kind of earthy peat smoke. It's not a kind of more kind of medicinal style. There's lots of fruit, lots of lemon, lots of peach. Get that, again, the vanilla coming through from the casks. Absolutely beautiful. It works really, really nicely, and there's a lovely kind of salty sea breeze aspect there as well. But yeah, we don't want to sit around nosing too much. It's good to get an idea of the character before we start tasting. So have a little taste again, and as everyone has said before, you let this sit on your palate. Just let it kind of sit there for a while, let it warm up. Just get acquainted with it. Have a couple of sips, and really get to know that whiskey. Get a feel of the texture and the viscosity here. Because for a young whiskey, I think that's one of the secrets or the keys to what it is we're doing here. Is that slow distillation. You're getting lots and lots of oil, getting really good flavors from the barley coming through. So, Slanger.
Adam, this is delicious. Really delicious. So lovely and sweet, and like this kind of barley sugar note coming through.
Yeah.
That lovely light peat smoke, little saltiness as well. It's just so beautiful. Really, really lovely. And so I'm curious. So Port Charlotte is one of my favorite peated whiskies. But so the longer a peated whiskey stays in cask, the more the peat kind of dies away over time. It kind of dies off. At what point, because Port Charlotte is quite a highly peated whiskey, at what point do you start to see that drop off in the amount of smoke that's in there?
Interestingly enough, when you think of again that ppm, that 40 ppm, it drops off quite quickly. It drops off in the distillation. Because really, when we're distilling, we're not looking to distill for that specific kind of point where the phenols come through in the distillation, which would be kind of towards the tails and into the tails, looking to get a really kind of tight quality middle cut, lots and lots of purity and elegance in the spirit. So really, we're not distilling to get the phenols through in the spirit. So we kind of discard them quite quickly, if you like. What we're looking to do with the Port Charlotte range, we have a 10-year-old product as a kind of core, and the Islay barley alongside it, which is about 6-7 years, depending on the when it was distilled and when we come to bottle. So really, what we're seeing is that around the kind of 10 to kind of 12 years, there's still a good level of peat in there. It's really, really nicely balanced, really nicely integrated into the whiskey. Actually just released, again, just to kind of touch on the Islay Festival, we had plans to do a couple of releases, as we always do. We couldn't do that, so we had actually, bottling hall is shut down, everything's shut down, and we can't get anything bottled we planned. We had bottled 16-year-old Charlotte, which we've just released in kind of in lieu of a festival we'll taste online with people on the day. And even at 16, we've got a lovely level of peat. There's a lot of flavour coming from the cask with an extra kind of time in cask, a lot of maturation kind of flavours from the oak coming through. But the peat's still there. I think the secret with Port Charlotte, it's still a work in progress. The oldest whiskey we have was distilled in 2001. We have yet to see how it ages kind of past that. So it's really quite an exciting kind of stage in Charlotte's journey.
Absolutely. Again, another cracking whiskey. Everyone seems to really love this one with notes of, I love this one, apple smeared with Marmite.
Yeah, absolutely. Apple, that kind of stewed apple, that the Marmite, I'm not picking that up so much, but the stewed apples is a real kind of key kind of sign of the Bruichladdich spirit, Charlotte spirit, Octomore. You always get that lovely fruit. I get lots of stone fruit in here, kind of apricot and peach. Again, that lovely citrus, a touch of salt in there as well. Finish, I think, is really key. The smoke is balanced nicely everywhere else, but through the finish, once you've allowed that to sit for a little while, you've got that lovely kind of dry beach bonfire, that kind of lovely woody smoke coming through on the finish, which is, I think, it's a lovely thing. It's not that big, heavy medicinal peat. It's got a lovely elegance to it. I think that's a lovely thing with Charlotte.
Yeah. Do you I'm going to put this question to the other distillers, because I know Brian, you work with peated malt at Glenfiddich and at Balvenie as well. Sarah, do you work with peated barley at Macallan too?
We have very limited stocks of peated Macallan, but we do have peated Macallan.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, do you work with very much at all? Do you ever consider putting much of that in into your Dalmore or any of your other single malts?
Yeah, we've done, every single distillery has gone through that. Islay is the one that gives us the character. But, I'll just say one point, that when we brought the Shackleton whiskey up, which of course was in 2007, a very peaty style of whiskey back in 1907, we actually used that. It's the only time that we've used Dalmore, because it came originally from the Glenmore distillery, but Dalmore was the nearest to that distillery, and that's the only time that we've actually used it. But it's in the back burner. It may be something, but a lot of people just think you peat the whiskey and that's it. Well, everybody knows it comes up slowly and then goes down. So it's getting the right level, the right style. And if you want to make it consistent, then you take the whole blinking lot and you put it together, and then you'll get uniformity. People just think, oh, you peat it and you get everything's the same. It's not the same. It's a highly classic area. You've got to be very careful how you do it. And even when you utilize it in a blend, especially in a blend, you've got to be very careful. So you've got to take your hats off to these guys in Islay and anybody that uses it. It's a real precision that needs when you're doing it.
I'm just going to say to everybody who's watching, we are going to be wrapping up very soon. So if you have any more questions for our whiskey makers, then please put them in the comments now, because I'm going to try and get through as many as possible before we finish. Just to give you a bit of time to put those questions in. Billy, I know in Ireland, obviously, we've got Connemara, which is a peated whiskey, and that's been around for quite some time now. And there is this kind of misconception that all Scotch whiskey is peated and all Irish whiskey is unpeated, which we know is not the truth. But have you seen many more distilleries starting to use peat in Ireland now that there's been such a growth of distilleries over there?
There are a few of the new distilleries starting to experiment with peat. It's something that we haven't done at Middleton at well. I shouldn't say at all, because we just recently launched the most expensive ever Irish whiskey, which was a 45-year-old peated malt, which goes against everything I've said this evening, that we only produce pot still whiskey unpeated. But this was a 45-year-old malt that was distilled in the old Middleton distillery. So I suppose tradition has it that Irish whiskey is unpeated. But I don't think we can say that any longer. I mean, the new entrants to the Irish whiskey category are going to want to establish a style of their own, and that may well include peat. And if it does, good luck.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Guys, we're going to ask a few of these questions that have come through, and this one has come up quite a few times, and I have noticed it. I have been saving it for the end. So here we go. This is a question from Dace Calidri. Could you please ask our whiskey makers what is the most interesting fact about their distilleries? Smirks from everyone while they try and think very quickly about what that might be.
Yeah, listen, I can start now. I don't know what I stand to be corrected on this, but we in Middleton have the largest operating pot stills in the world. We have 10 of them at 80,000 litre capacity each.
And for just for reference, what is a normal size pot still? For instance, Richard, what are the size of the pot stills at Dalmore?
Well, you know, ours are 20 feet tall, and as I said to you already, they're really bulbous still. They're not small. They're not squat. That is the sort of, you know, typical shape that gives us the reflex that we look for. But it really is about the cask curation, just like Sarah was talking about the cask curation at Macallan. It's exactly the same at Dalmore, but it's trying to get that age. You know, when you talk about ages 62, 64, they are now rare, and that's why we're very lucky to have that cask curation going in the background. So, you know, they're all important. There's every part, whether it be the location, the water, the pot still, but they all play their part. But to us, it's the cask curation that gives us the style that we're actually looking for.
Okay. And it is the most interesting fact about your distillery, how much your, about the Dalmore at least anyway, how much your nose is insured for, supposedly.
It's a couple of quid, you know. It used to be, I mean, a lot of people still talk about that, but it was insured for something like £2 million, and then they put the premium up. So we won't talk about that, okay?
Always dodging that question. Brian, I'm going to put it to you. What's the most interesting fact about, any of the distilleries that you look after?
Yeah, absolutely. I suddenly feel very inadequate because I haven't got any props. I'm amazed how many props Richard keeps pulling from under that table. I've got a glass, and that's it. But it's always hard, that, isn't it? What makes things unique? For sure, the water source at Glenfiddich is a huge thing for us. We spend a massive amount of time protecting the Robidoux Spring, and we're one of the few distilleries that uses the same water source literally in every single bottle. From everybody does it in production water, of course, but all the way through to the reducing water for the bottling strength and so on. And that's been a massive thing as the distillery's grown over the years. But probably for me personally, it's the on-site cooperage, because to be able to have a conversation with the coopers who are looking after our casks on the distillery, everything's kind of end to end, and the personalities involved, and that ability to link with craftsmen who frankly, as Richard says, 60, 70, 80% of the flavour of the final whiskey is going to come from those casks. So to be totally linked in and part of that team in the cooperage, that's probably the most important part for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Most cooperages are off-site. So anybody who's watching who hasn't necessarily been to a distillery or even visited a cooperage, there aren't that many, very few distilleries in Scotland which actually have a cooperage on site, and a lot in Speyside use the Speyside cooperage for the construction of all of their casks when they come in, either from America or from Spain if it's sherry, or elsewhere as well. Sarah, Macallan is, an incredible distillery, and I think, I showed a picture earlier. I think it's worth showing it again, because this was built just how many years ago now was it finished?
It was finished and opened in 2018.
2018. So this is an architectural marvel. It's so different to what any other distillery in the world actually looks like. It's just incredible. So I know that the amount of skill that's gone into actually creating this distillery is just insane. So you must have hundreds of interesting facts about the Macallan.
Well, I think I kind of feel, Becky, like I started off this with revealing the secret about the whiskey, and I feel like I revealed the unique points that I love about the distillery already. The fact that we've got our own 485-acre estate is unique. The fact that we have got our own stretch of the River Spey for salmon fishing is unique. The fact that we just opened a new distillery in 2018, and it being so absolutely beautiful, and it blends so beautifully into the environment. Roger Stark Harbour Partners that designed the distillery really took the landscape into account, and I live and have lived in Speyside for the bulk of my life, and I've driven down the road towards Craigellachie where you view Easter Elchie's house, and in the daytime you don't actually even see the new distillery. But at night time, as you come down that hill and look across, you see Easter Elchie's house lit up beautifully. And then suddenly it looks like there's a village that you didn't even notice before, but that village is in fact the distillery, lit up, the stills looking stunning, which you can even see from the road. So there's so many special things, I think, for us here at Macallan.
For me, one of the most special things that I didn't get to witness in person, I could only watch it through video form, and I think it's still on YouTube if you wanted to go and look at it, was the incredible light show that you had to open the distillery with.
It was absolutely fabulous. Because the opening ceremony was in May, and obviously it gets lighter and lighter as each night goes on. So the light show itself got later and later as the week went on for the launch event. And it started off with over the weekend with the test run that people in Speyside were seeing this bright lights and hearing these noises, and everyone commenting to social media, what was this? But by the time it was Friday, the actual main road was a bit like a car park while people just looked at the distillery to see the light show for themselves. It was absolutely amazing. And it is, like Becky says, it's really worth, if you've not seen that launch event, take a look at it on YouTube. It's fabulous.
It's insane. Actually, another event which you should have a look at, find a video for, is the Brook Laddie Open Day during Facial as well, when it seems like the entire population of Islay, this small Scottish island, piles into the forecourt of Brook Laddie Distillery to eat, drink, dance, listen to music, catch up with each other. It's incredible, isn't it, Adam?
It is. I'm getting kind of goosebumps even thinking about it just now. It's an incredible. I mean, the sun always shines. There's one interesting fact, but the sun always shines in Brook Laddie's Open Day, no matter what. So there's a wee deal done with somebody there to make that happen, but I won't talk too much about that. But I would say it's an amazing thing. So I've had a bit of time here to kind of think about all the interesting facts of Brook Laddie, and I can't decide between them all. There's some of the equipment we use, it dates back to 1881, a very traditional kind of hands-on way of doing things. I think for me, if I had to pick one thing, it would be the people. I think that's the big thing. As a big size distillery, we produce about 1 million litres of alcohol every year, and so that makes us the third smallest producer on the island. We employ by far the most. We employ just over 100 people in the company. About 86 of them actually, maybe slightly more now, are based at the distillery in Islay. So we're trying to do everything centrally: maturation, bottling, obviously distillation, barley growing. We're currently about to build a malting. So I think there's many different aspects, but I think the people and the team and the passion that we have here is the thing I'm most proud of. I think it's the most interesting thing at the distillery for me.
Rightly so. You've got an amazing team that's working there. As you know, I've been very lucky to get to know most of your distilleries and to get to know your teams as well. And you've all got like phenomenal people working around you, creating such wonderful whiskies that we've been so lucky to have tonight and to taste. I'm going to finish off with one last question, because we do work in the whiskey industry and we do love whiskey. We make it, we live it, we breathe it. But there is one question, because we're not always going to be on the whiskey. Matt Baker asks, do the experts drink any other spirits, or are you only partial to whiskey? Sarah's covering her face. Go on.
I've got a very flexible approach to the spirits category. Let's just say that.
Are you on the absinthe on a Friday night, Sarah? Is that
Not quite absinthe. You know, I like a tequila. I like mezcal. I enjoy a gin. You know, what's a holiday breakfast without a Bloody Mary? You know, I love the spirits category.
Oh,
So sorry.
But vodka apparently is one of the most ordered items during lockdown. Who knew? Vodka's back, people.
Well,
People will be having Bloody Marys for breakfast because they don't have to drive anywhere, you know.
That's true. That's true. Exactly. You just put it in your coffee cup and no one's the wiser when you're on a Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Brian, what do you normally drink when you're not on the whiskey? When you're not nosing and sampling all your whiskies in your sample room?
yeah, similar. All in the name of research. You've got to dabble a little bit, but Hendricks and tonic is my go-to. You know, after work, I'm already thinking tomorrow, 2:30. End of the working day for us at William Grant. It's going to have to be Hendricks and tonic. I've got a whiskey tasting tomorrow night, so I need to just take it easy though.
Staying on brand, Brian.
Of course.
You
cut me, it goes all the way through.
Just made a cucumbers and gin.
Of course.
Billy, how about you? What do you drink when you're not on the whiskey?
Yeah, it's I suppose it's a fair question, but I probably stick mostly with the whiskey. You know, one of the favorite, or one of the highlights of my calendar is the trips to Jerez. You know, to do the regular cask inspection and do the business down there. Okay, sherry. I don't think there are enough people drinking sherry.
Yeah.
That's just a general statement I want to make. But whenever I'm down there, like, there is some very, very good Spanish brandy. You talked about Cardinal Mendoza or Grand Duke d'Alba, things like that. I enjoy those, and they remind me of the trips to Spain.
I totally agree with you. Sherry is so underrated, particularly by the British public. Guys, get out there, try some sherry. It's not all super sweet either. If you like a dry flavor, then try a Vino or a Manzanilla. It's delicious, beautiful. Especially if you enjoyed the saltiness of some of the whiskies today, then you'll get that in some nice dry sherry as well. So yeah, I'm with you on that one, Billy. Richard, what about you? Billy's already said sherry, so what are you going to go with?
I'm a great Burgundy man. I love Burgundy, Romani Conti. Then I move over usually to Bordeaux, Chateau Lafite 61, 47, 49. And then I finish up with Chateau Yquem 1970. And then I drink perhaps just a wee Grimsport 1970. And that's just, the first night.
Somebody's thought about this quite a lot.
Yeah, but you've got to just say, just a bit like Billy and Brian, who we sit with on many occasions, if we don't drink other people's whiskies and lots of different cognacs and ports and sauternes and French wines, Australian, then we are not building up our portfolio of what we want to procure and then, cask curation in the future. So these are things that we are living with literally all the time, looking to see and investigate what we can use in the future to entice our whiskey consumers. But whiskey, what it does at the end of the day, it brings everybody together, just like what you've done tonight.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Richard. That's the best sentiment I've heard in regards to the whiskey industry, and it's so true. And even in the midst of what's happening at the moment with the coronavirus pandemic, the whiskey industry has never pulled together as close as it has done in my memory of working within the industry, at least anyway. So I'm really I'm so happy to be working in such a lovely industry with such wonderful people who really pull together all of the time. We're one big whiskey family, right? Adam,
yeah.
Adam, finish us off. What are you going to be drinking that's not whiskey?
Well, I think to kind of to echo what everyone else has been saying, I think particularly Richard there, that you've got to be expanding your kind of knowledge of wines and sherries, and I really enjoy sherry. And again, the brandies, we work with a producer called Fernando de Castilla, and they produce some amazing brandies. So that was every now and again, get a wee bottle over at the distillery, and I make sure I don't share that one. That's just for me. But again, it's like it's changed. You've got to be expanding your knowledge and understanding cask and flavors from wines, etc. But to be honest, when it comes to, again, very similar to Brian, when it comes to Friday evening, it won't be a Hendrix, it'll be a botanist and tonic, but it's just clean and refreshing. But I think that's for me. I mean, I've worked a long time, and obviously before we made the botanist, kind of the last thing you want to do after working in whiskey all day was go to the dram, and so I'd have a gin and tonic. And when we made the botanist, I was delighted because it was kind of the monthly bottle. So not that it lasted a month, obviously, but that was the one for me. A wee botanist and tonic.
Great answer, of course, and well done to those of you who didn't mention your own brands, but we also love a bit of the botanist and Hendrix as well. So well done, thank you. Do you know what, we've run over a little bit. I think it's been worth it. Everybody is stuck with us right through to the end. We've just grown in the amount of people watching us as time's gone on. So I think everyone's just so happy to have joined this tasting and have all 5 of you whiskey makers join us. A huge thank you from me, and I'm absolutely certain everybody watching is just so grateful to have heard such wonderful things from all 5 of you and to taste amazing whiskies as well. There's some lovely comments coming through, everyone saying how great this was, so thank you so much. And as a reminder, all of the profits from this whiskey tasting, as with the rest of the OurWhisky virtual whiskey festival, is all going to the Drinks Trust charity. So can we please show so much gratitude and a round of applause for all of the whiskey makers and all of their brands as well for sponsoring this event, so that we can raise the most amount possible to donate to the Drinks Trust. And also a round of applause for yourselves as well for joining in with us. If you did buy a tasting pack, thank you so much. You've been supporting such a great cause as well, so thank you, all of you. Brian, Sarah, Adam, Richard, Billy, thank you so much for everything. I'm going to say goodbye to you all now. Thank you all so much for joining us and for sharing your whiskies. Slange. So that just leaves me to say thanks again, everybody, for joining us. If you haven't already, then please, if you're watching it on YouTube, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel, because there may be so many more videos coming up in the future. You never know what you might find. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well, because if you are interested in whiskey and you want to learn more about it, then you can find out more information by following us there. Maybe about future tastings, you never know. Next week, we've got our final instalment of the OurWhisky Virtual Whiskey Festival, so please join us again. So next Thursday, the 21st of May, 6 p.m. I'll be sharing links again out, but it's pretty much the same time, same place, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. So please join us again. Huge thank you also goes out to Claxton's and the Dram team again for supporting us. Really appreciate all of that. For now, good night, have a lovely evening, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.